Welcome. So London, what's going on? The UK capital has been in the headlines frequently these last few weeks, and for incredibly sad violent reasons. Saturday 3rd of June, a van mowed into pedestrians on London Bridge around 11 p.m. Three men exited the back of the van and proceeded to indiscriminately stab people around Borough Market, until they were shot dead by armed police officers. The aftermath led to 7 people dead and 48 seriously injured. This is a shock to any global city, but another very upsetting event unfolded during the early hours of Wednesday morning, 14th of June. Roughly around 1 a.m, residents reported a fire at Grenfell Tower, Notting Hill, West London. The 1st Brigade of firefighters arrived shortly after 1 a.m. to be faced with a fire that rapidly ripped through the 24-storey tower with incredible speed. The tower housed 120 different 1 to 2 bedroom apartments. At the time of writing this, the death toll stands at 79, with numbers expected to rise. There is real anger at the mainstream media and authorities at potentially underplaying the death toll. Some estimate it realistically maybe reaches 150 people. I've even seen speculation on social media from friends and family of firefighters who have claimed that as many as 600 people actually died. It doesn't take long for an event like this to be politicised, especially after the recent UK general election. People of the United Kingdom are in a heightened state of awareness to government policy towards public services such as firefighters, healthcare and housing provision. These political controversies are even more acute in a busy, crowded city such as London. Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party opposition, still buoyant from strengthened election successes, engaged with the residents and was largely embraced well. This was typical of his campaigning skills throughout the election campaign. Theresa May also stayed true to her campaigning style, which was controlled, and she largely stayed away from the general public, which has been widely criticised. Some have even said that this reaction was similar to George Bush's disinterest in residents who were affected by Hurricane Katrina. This personal distance could harm the Prime Minister's position even more, but I guess there could be security concerns given the strength of feeling. So why has the Prime Minister remained hidden? It's obvious she is very uncomfortable meeting people in public. In a way, on a human level, you can feel sorry for her because it seems to manifest as a kind of social anxiety. Whereas Jeremy Corbyn has been campaigning for 40 years against some very hostile forces. The Prime Minister simply does not have this skill. After much pressure, Prime Minister May finally met survivors at number 10 Downing Street, her residence. It is reported the meeting was heated and very fractious. There are other factors at play to do with the Conservative government's policy towards austerity, public sector cuts and the obsession of reducing so-called red tape and the regulation of profit over policies that actually help normal people. But we'll examine this in more detail in a moment. It's important to look at and consider all facets and avenues to this very sad situation. No matter how uncomfortable or seemingly ridiculous, it needs to be explored deeply. London for a long time has been able to navigate very carefully the subject of multiculturalism. Considering the huge mix of nationalities, wealth and religions, London has tended to work and operate harmoniously. In many areas of London, the wealthy and poor have lived side by side, and again in relative peace. To give the situation context, it's important to look at Notting Hill, the area and its history. Notting Hill during the 1980s was run down, and since the 1950s was a very popular area for Caribbean immigrants who moved over to the United Kingdom to fill many jobs and positions needed after recovery from World War II. It was cheap to live there, and so also becomes a very creative area for artists and musicians to settle. As is typical, the artists and the minority communities make an area interesting and vibrant, and soon this starts to attract wealth. This is a typical urban narrative, but Notting Hill was way ahead of the curve. Predominantly now, Notting Hill is incredibly affluent. Many poor families and minority communities are being pushed further out of London and even out of the capital. Indeed, authorities such as Westminster have a policy of rehousing families and individuals in other towns and cities rather than providing accommodation. Grenfell Tower is increasingly isolated and dominantly surrounded by luxury apartments and other properties. It was previously managed by local authority Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, but its management was transferred to a private company, Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation. The transfer of public assets into private hands is a common picture across the country. There has been much criticism because of the inflated upper management salaries and the for-profit model when it comes to public services and amenities. Many Grenfell residents were hypercritical of the management company's service and responsiveness to issues and maintenance problems. The tower had recently finished a refurbishment that cost £10 million, which included the addition of aluminium insulated cladding on the outside of the building, along with replacement of a lot of the external windows. Some of the residents have noted that these improvements were for aesthetic reasons only, for the 1960s tower to be more pleasing to the eye for residents of the surrounding luxury properties. In fact, it is the cladding on the outside of the building and the flammable insulation that is to be blamed for the speed and veracity of the fire, with reports surfacing that the flame retardant version of the cladding was only £5,000 more expensive for the entire building. It turns out government ministers Gavin Barwell and Brandon Lewis were aware of some of the safety concerns of the tower blocks and sat upon a vital report warning that there was a potential risk. Concrete tower blocks like this, when a fire breaks out, generally affects only 1 to 2 floors due to the concrete construction and other effective fire solutions. Grenfell's story is a poignant symbolic symptom of London's current social landscape and housing market, with a lack of affordable housing for lower middle income families. London's housing market is buoyant, inflated and incredibly attractive to overseas investors, and there is little regulation to stop them, which unfortunately seems to attract dubious companies and individuals around the globe to invest in London property, sometimes overtly laundering dirty money. The current government has presided over persistent cuts to fire stations. Previous London Mayor Boris Johnson, who is now the Foreign Secretary, presided over cutting 552 firefighter jobs and closing 10 fire stations. For a growing busy complex city as London, it seems to have been a huge error. Heavy public service cuts have put a huge strain to respond effectively to emergencies. 39% of Conservative MPs are landlords and voted down Jeremy Corbyn's law to make homes fit for human habitation by making them safe. And in fact, Sajid Javid was spearheading a campaign to cut £10 billion of red tape over 5 years. And this included deregulation of the fire safety industry. It's the perfect political storm. Underfunded emergency services, healthcare, safety deregulation and greed and desire to maximise profit over people who tend not to have a voice. So it's important now that the Prime Minister, government and local authority acts responsibly in rebuilding Grenfell Tower and rehousing the community. Otherwise, if the land area is redeveloped into more luxury properties, people will quite rightly start to harbour suspicions whether the fire was deliberately started to drive the community out. Obviously, there's no evidence so far for any criminal intent, but the authorities need to be very mindful of their actions. We very much believe in the karmic order of the universe, the UK's government's behaviour towards the less fortunate in society, and the continuing policy of profit over people's safety and well-being really has flown back to really truly haunt them. Protests have erupted across the city in solidarity and anger over the situation, for the loss of life, community and the ruling class's behaviour has created profound sadness in the city. During the aftermath of the fire, there was television news footage detailing UFO in the background while firefighters were working to put out the fire. I will post the video below. Are they watching concern for the large loss of life? Maybe, potentially that is the case. Thanks very much for watching. This has been Reconsider. Bye bye.